So like just for our watchers slash listeners who are unfamiliar with your conversation and attachment, like what is what is an insecure attachment? Can you just give a little overview of that and maybe the spectrum just so people have an idea of what it is in case they're unfamiliar?
Absolutely. I'm going to try to do it in like 30 seconds or less. Time. No. So basically what happens is, and this is based on research, this is based on tons and tons of science. This is not just our idea, but that you can predict how your child is going to respond, actually even by the attachment status of the grandparent and the parent before the child's born. So it's highly connected intergenerationally. And what it is, basically, think of it as it sets up a trajectory. And so the gist is if you have a good enough parent or caregiver that gets it right,
about 70% of the time.
So in other words, it's just pass fail. You don't have to be perfect. But if in general you're responded to, then you're unconsciously, your nervous system has a map that says, okay, my needs are reasonable and the world is generally going to meet them. And that's what secure attachment looks like.
And what's really important about that is that she's saying it is not just the way we think, it's how our body develops.
Right. It's not a thought at all, actually.
So our body is trained from infancy on up to read people and how to keep ourselves safe. Mm-hmm. And through those early relationships, we learn to keep ourselves safe. And sometimes insecurity develops because to keep ourselves safe, we actually do need to look at the world. Our individuals that were taking care of us as children may not have been for their reasons unknown, be able to be reliable. So we learn strategies. I would say insecure attachment is a strategy for how to keep yourself safe.
I really like to say that.
And if the environment itself, you needed to keep alert, let's say your parents there but not there, and you need to continue to watch the environment because we need them for survival reasons, then our body develops even our autonomic nervous system develops to be tuned even in our inner ear, et cetera, to watch our environment and be aware. Or if our environment...
Yeah, it's designed to keep your caregiver available to you. So sometimes in that example, with a high regulation, with upregulation, it's when a caregiver, that if you reach out and if you're hurt, or if you need something, or if you, that sort of thing, they'll respond very well to that. Versus if you're okay, they might ignore you. So then it begins to bias information one direction versus you were going to say.
Right. Bias information one direction about how you feel about yourself and how worthy you are. That's really important. Because if you have to stay alert and rely on other people, it means that they are very, very confident for you.
That's say about the other side.
That's the source. So yeah, and then the other side is, it is also an insecure way, and this one's really important related to depression, anxiety as well, that you may have learned that your environment is not consistently there. And if you look up and you're trying to rely on an environment that's not consistently there, that's not adaptive. So you quit looking up and you really develop a system inside yourself to rely on yourself. And actually, that can create insecurity in that you
don't know you're insecure.
That's true.
I love to say that because you think you're fine.
But you fear intimacy, you fear closeness, and that creates a difficulty reaching out to people when you're feeling depressed or feeling anxious. You don't even maybe recognize depression or anxiety in you. You can tend to project it into other people because you don't necessily feel your own.
Got it.
So that's a lot.
Yeah, I was like, you were going to say something, Sue. Okay.
Well, I think the gist of it generally is that, and going back to your original question, which was, is attachment everything? And the answer is absolutely not, it isn't. But it is related to a few diagnoses. And so depending on where you are on the spectrum, since this workshop is about anxiety and depression, then that's going to put you over, generally, if it is an attachment related orientation, it's going to put you in more of the preoccupied side of things typically.
Got it.
Anyway, I'll let you ask.
Yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate that. So for everyone watching right now, if you weren't familiar with this whole topic of attachment, that's how it, is tying into this. So I know also in your work, you talk about specifically like adult attachment and that it's different than the more original or popular infant attachment. So I guess I'd love it if you just briefly touch on that, if you could, and also then tie in like what are some of the what are some of the keys to the adult attachment world that could help people understand their depression, for example?
Bingo.
That's like 5 questions in one.
That's 5 questions.
Great question.
So when we think of infant attachment, we think of what we were just speaking about, sort of the original connections to our caregivers. But as we grow through life, we have lots of different relationships that impact us. And the good news is it continues to impact how we develop our mind and our body all the way up into adulthood. So the adult attachment research focuses much more on how that has manifested in our perspective of the world. So adult attachment looks a lot about two primary variables, and that is how much do you appreciate and rely on attachment, or how much do you avoid it, right?
Mm.
And then the other one is on, so there's one avoidance and the other is on anxiety. How much anxiety do you have about will people be able to be there for you, and how much security do you have within you? So those are the 2 predominant factors that we look at in adult attachment research.
Got it.
Right, and there's a real easy visual, and we'll send it to you as a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
People can just download it right
Right.
away.
Okay.
I thought about holding it up and stuff like that, but that gets awkward. And the reason it's important is because generally, if you think of like Anne's saying, that there's these 2 continuums and they cross over. And the way we try to make it more simple is it's also that you think about, do you value yourself high, low? Do you value other people high, low? And so what security looks like, and this is where if you're depressed or if you're anxious, we're going to want to help move you into this more secure way of relating, which is that you both value yourself and the other person. We can get into trouble, many of us, feeling like we have something to say and the other person doesn't, or isn't valued, or even trauma, and where that you're both not trusting yourself, but you're also not trusting your environment. Like there's not a safe place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another sort of trajectory in. And
these impact relationships quite a bit. And depression and anxiety has a lot to do with how we relate to the world and how we relate to the people that we love or in our environment. Like a positive social support is a really big factor for being able to reduce depression and manage anxiety. And if you have, let's say, on an anxious attachment, and we call that red, but an anxious attachment, you tend to not value yourself enough and overvalue other people. And the trouble with that is that the good news is that you value other people. That is a really important element. But because you don't value yourself, you tend to reach for other people, sometimes in not very productive, constructive ways. Because you're preoccupied and you're worried about rejection and you're worried about abandonment, you tend to focus on these relationships. Yeah, you focus on the relationships through criticism or through kind of externally watching people a lot and reaching for people in ways that end up, unfortunately, can create more distance from other people. And that, because you need other people, but your methods and strategies aren't effective, it can leave you in a chronic state of anxiety, because somebody may love you and adore you, but find you too much, so they pull away. And unfortunately, what you tend to do is then pursue. So one of the things about overcoming, your title of Overcoming Anxiety Depression, we really believe in looking at your attachment strategy as an adult to help you with it, because it's not about your worth, and you learn that. It is about your methods and your behavior strategies. Mm-hmm. So you're looking for your worth from someone else, but in a strategy that's pushing people away. And when you really look at your own strategies and develop some strategies, it can help you really manage some anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like you talking about worth, especially because the thing about it is every listener out there is already worthy and is already valuable. But the difficulty is that that we lose contact with that we and so that gets into what you're saying about looking for that thing that we already have outside. Oh my gosh, I just thought of Wizard of Oz, right? Like there's no place like home, right? It ends up being a dream, and really she's brought back to herself. And that's where the preoccupation and I'm particularly thinking about with anxiety and depression of like self-attack and self-hatred and getting in those eddies of abuse, really. And so another way of applying this attachment material is to think about, do you have a secure relationship with yourself? And what that would look like would be an integrated thing. You see yourself realistically, I'm not so great at that, or I really screwed up on that one. But you're not the worst of the worst.
Yeah. This whole conversation around, I'm so glad you brought it into like relationships, because obviously, right, relationships are a huge part of who we are. And it reminds me of our conversation for our Breaking Free from Abandonment event, because I, as someone who is the more anxious type in the world of abandonment, and that was one of the big reasons we did that event, I always learned so much. It's that self-fulfilling.
Yeah, it's great free therapy, isn't it?
Right, yeah. Oh yeah, like the self.
That's how we do it too.
Right. All of us talking about this obviously are familiar with it, and that living with that anxiety, and then sadly, I guess, right, like putting it into relationships where it's not very attractive to be, right? Like,
it's not sexy.
Yeah, it's not sexy.
Clingy is not sexy.
No. Yeah.
But I have to say, neither is being super stoic and not needing anything. That's really, it doesn't draw people in. It's hard to bond.
Right. Yes.
There's a middle spot where that you're vulnerable and you're accessible. So probably for those of you listening, I don't know which, are you falling on the side of leaning on people too much and worrying too much about relationships? Are you falling on the side of isolation and loneliness? And what we tend to encourage is to really try to find that secure place, and starting with that secure contact with yourself. And I'm sure lots of people that are on the show for you are talking about how to get grounded and how to get kind of recentered. So all of those things will be important. But if we can't start, like, we want to start with that grounding here and have the forgiveness and have the compassion and all those things that we're talking about that we're chasing down from the person over there who's not calling us back or whatever it is. And you mentioned sexy or you mentioned attractive. It's like that. Then, like, one of the things about being upregulated or anxious, so let's talk about anxiety specifically, is that you get yourself up on I call it like up on the ceiling. And because you're like, and this, and that, and we speak in exclamation points, and you know what I mean? We're really trying to make our point and show them what they did wrong, right?
Especially when we're in a state of distress.
When we're dysregulated, right? And so some of the work, like a quick fix or whatever, is that you take yourself more seriously. And it might look like somebody who's depressed isn't taking themselves seriously enough, or is anxious is not taking. But like, if you really get quiet and pay attention and really know that it matters, that your nervous system is revved up, like that's the beginning of caring. You know what I mean? And by getting yourself a little more grounded, then as you speak, well, one, you'll know what to ask for. It's not to get them to call you back. It's really not going to scratch the itch. It's something more about knowing that you're valued, knowing that you have worth.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I think adding to that is the idea of the hyperactivating needing boundaries, because we think of boundaries about boundarying out somebody else, but it's actually boundaries about self-care.
Yeah, like don't text 50 times.
Yes. Like, so setting your own certain limits. And to bring it into other relationships, one of the things that we tend to do when we hyperactivate is be very big caretakers of other people.
Oh yeah.
And some of our anxiety is our worry for others. It's not just worry about rejection. It's often worry for others, whether it's our kids or our partner. And so being fastidious and caring, but sometimes I can't settle until I know I can get you taken care of.
Right.
Can create.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it can create almost a perpetual sense that actually creates an intensity of hypervigilance rather than a decrease, because now I don't need to just watch people to not get rejected. I need to make sure everybody's okay and doesn't get hurt or rejected themselves. And it feels very loving. And you can also get a lot of rewards out there. She's so selfless. You often hear somebody hyperactivating is called selfless. So you get a lot of rewards for being so caring, but you're not necessarily taking care of yourself along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates more anxiety for you, and unknowingly more anxiety for all these people we're trying to help.
Right.
That's right. It's a defense, and that basically people pick up when you need them to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they're taking care of you and saying, oh, this is lovely. Oh, this tastes so good, and da, 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 da. And now we're in this loop where we're not actually getting contact in the way that would feed us and help us get out of that anxiety and depression, help soothe our body, so that we're taking in the nutrients that we actually need.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.